Estonia and Lithuania. And there was a coup when Gorbachev was kidnapped and taken to the Crimea. And here am I in the middle of this workshop up a mountain, very similar to where we live in Hendersonville. And all the professors, we had 10 workshops going at the same time. And in each workshop there were 200 professors, university students and teachers from all over the whole Soviet Union. So it was a very large operation. And then the coup happened and Gorbachev was taken to the Crimea. And it looked like they would revert back to communism. And as it happened, the coup was ended. And then I went from Riga in Latvia, where we had gunboat helicopters going around and a tank outside our hotel where we had all of our records. Were you there at that time, John?
No.
You weren't there yet. Anyway, it was a very, very scary time, and I had grown up as a child listening to all these horror stories, and then all of a sudden, I'm in the middle of one of them. It's like, oh, this is not good. This is really not good. And 2 weeks later, June was pregnant with our second son, and we had tickets to go to Australia, where I'm from, and here am I thinking, oh, I'm going to wind up in Siberia, and this is the end of it. And so I got on a train, went to St. Petersburg, which is a beautiful city. If you ever go to that part of the world, it's got some of the most beautiful art. John and Sharon can tell you about that much more. And I got there, and they had stopped the tanks from coming into the city, and then the coup was over. And then I went out to the airport, and there's 25,000 Americans and Europeans trying to get out of Russia, because we still didn't know what was really going to happen. Unfortunately, I got on a plane and went to Australia a couple of weeks later. But it was just a real, compared to what the saints went through and the people like the Pacers and others that were missionaries there, it was just a taste of how intense it can be, and the freedoms that we have here that many young people don't agree with, and especially the push towards socialism in the universities. They really don't know their history, and they need to travel. Today, as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about what is the essence of true love. And we all have a hole in our hearts, and it's almost like the Grand Canyon. It's a desire for love. But we don't really understand what true love is. And my theory, after going to the seminary and working on different materials like Cultivating Heart and Character, Educating for Life's Most Essential Goals, that I'll be talking about after lunch, and the character education books. My theory is most of us don't really understand the principle. If you don't understand the Confucian ethic, and if you don't understand the Bible, it's extremely difficult to understand the principle and teach the principle. And that's why when ministers like Dr. Abernathy, he's now blessed over 3,600 couples. And he's done that because he gets it. He understands the principle on a deep level, because he's obviously an expert in the Bible. So we have to become more biblically sound and more understanding. So then, what is true love? What is the essence of true love? There's a lot of different definitions, but the Greeks have a definition of true love, what it is. Once I find it. The ancient Greeks divided love into numerous categories and described the various features of each. Eros was impassioned, romantic attraction. Philia was friendship. Eunonia stood for general benevolence or goodwill. Physique constituted kindness towards people of one's own race. Xenic represented kindness to the guest or stranger. But as we know, agape love is what we more experience here from a more traditional Christian view. For those of you that are more familiar with Buddhism and Confucianism, in Buddhism and Hinduism, it's talked about as compassion, or to be able to feel and understand someone else's suffering. And the deeper element of compassion is empathy. And then in Confucianism, it's called Jen, or human-heartedness. Can you do the next one, please? So an overarching element of true love is to live for the sake of others. But in the character education movement, we try and focus more on the social and emotional rather than the intellectual. And I believe that's one of the elements that we have to work towards to really connect with people on a different level. To understand love and understand elements of altruism and empathy and compassion, all the different virtues. But I would say one of the biggest elements of understanding and being able to practice true love is actually to be able to serve. And there's a lot of material about that. One of the books that I like to read from is a book called Why Good Things Happen to Good People. And this is a book, you can do the next slide, please. How to live a longer, healthier, happier life by the simple act of giving. And in this book, it gives examples of longitudinal studies of when you do service projects. When you give, then you can be able to develop your own heart and understand others. For instance, giving in high school predicts good physical and mental health all the way into adulthood, a time interval of over 50 years. So this is longitudinal studies. This is not some religious person saying, well, you just have to give faithfully. But it is an element of being able to understand giving as being able to benefit that in the future. Yeah. Great, thank you. Giving reduces mortality significantly in later in life. Giving reduces adolescent depression and suicide risk. Giving is more powerful than receiving in its ability to reduce mortality. Giving to others helps forgive for our own mistakes. Helping friends, relatives, and neighbor, along with providing emotional support to a spouse, reduces mortality, although receiving the same kind of help does not. So I'll pass this book around. And again, these are longitudinal studies. Dr. Stephen Post is a seminary graduate. He's still married to a Japanese sister. He's done research at the University of Chicago and now at Long Island University. And these are longitudinal studies over 40, 50 years. If a young person goes on to a service program, and from my experience of working with young people and sending them out to developing countries, most of them have life-changing experiences. Dr. Yong now is talking a lot about how do we bring the second generation back. And it's not going to be just coming to church services like this, although that's good. It's not only going to be listening to traditional services, but young people need to do things. They need to do service programs. They need to get out of their consciousness, and they need to help and serve others. And through that, they can grow and mature and help others. So that's one of the key elements of what true love really is to love and serve others. And especially when you go out to a developing country, I took some young people from Paterson, New Jersey to China. And when you go to the countryside of China, people don't have teeth, and running water is not just a given. And the same thing in Africa and parts of Central South America where Jim has been. So we want to be able to help them become more altruistic. But just telling them they have to do that is not enough. They need the experience of that. So that's where service is really, really key. Another element of true love is that it is other-centered. It is how you can look at others and understand others and connect with others. And even God needed another person besides ourselves. He needed an element to really love. And we need others to love. If we're just by ourselves, it's not enough. We need to be able to find and connect on a deeper level. Next slide, please. There's a lot within all the different faith traditions within Christianity which affirms this giving and being able to love and serve others in Christianity, taking care of others, So the faith traditions are very consistent in this manner. And Vladimir Solovey, philosopher, I believe, love shifts the center of our own personal lives. And when we're just thinking about ourselves, and one of the challenges in the Western world is that we think more about ourselves than others. So the more we think of others, and that doesn't mean we need to be a doormat, it doesn't mean that we need to just not take care of ourselves. And one thing I really like about Dr. Young is that he's saying that it's not as important to only do the mission out there, although that's really important, but we have to take care of ourselves, our health. And the front line is where, Tim?
Front line in the family.
Is in the family, at home, right? That's where the deepest level of restoration goes on. I've had the chance to travel many, many countries around the world, but the most challenging in relationships are with our spouses and with our children and with the people that we're closest to. Because you can go to a nice workshop, you can go to a nice conference, and it's comparatively easy. But at home, that's where the real deep restoration goes on. Next slide, please. So true love is obviously principled. There's certain elements to it, and it's based not only on feelings, but it is also based on rules and laws. So we have to learn what those rules and laws are. And a lot of the work that has happened is based on ethics. Ethics and being able to understand a deeper level of connection. And true love is beyond feelings. I often do workshops with young people and ask them, well, what is love? And this is a very difficult thing for people to connect with and to understand. But what is love? Is love just a feeling? Benji, is love just a feeling? What is love for you? What is true love for you? I'm going to put you on the spot because you do a lot of lecturing.
God's love.
God's love, okay. Bob, what is true love for you?
It's putting another person ahead of yourself.
Okay. Caroline, what is true love for you? Loving yourself,
Yeah.
accepting yourself. John Pace, you're a DP lecturer. What is true love? In 30 seconds.
True love is the force of love with the biggest picture in mind, with the universal values and principles to form it. It's formed through universal values and principles, and so it becomes a true love instead of just a force.
Jack?
I think it's being willing to give your time, give of yourself, sacrifice your wants and desires for the other.
Very good. Yeah, it's all those things. It's something that we don't really understand very much. I often hear, well, I love a McDonald's hamburger. Do you really love a McDonald's hamburger? I don't even like them much less. So we use the term very freely, right? But it's not something we really understand, and it's not easy to explain. I've asked this question in international conferences, at workshops, at UPF events, and there's a very small percentage of people that can answer that very well, of what really it is. And it's much more than just an action. So it's more than feelings, it's principles and rules. Can you please do the next one? Is serving and sacrificial. The elements of the deepest element, as many of you said, is serving others, is being sacrificial, of going beyond yourself. The most difficult thing, yes?
Yeah, can I say one thing?
Sure, go ahead.
You didn't ask me.
Okay, I'm asking you now.
I think to love someone simply means that you want them to be happy and that you want for their highest good. But I have a problem with this because we're speaking to a group of the most sacrificial people that I've ever met. The older unificationists who gave up everything and sacrificed everything.
Okay.
But the issue is they don't know how loved they are. And there's no self-love. Most people here feel like, oh, I haven't done enough.
Right.
I'm not worthy, and therefore they're blocking out the experience of the unconditional love of God.
Right. I
So I
agree.
do have a problem with the old sacrifice. I think that it's a big reason why our second gens want nothing to do with the church, because they're not receiving any. You can't ask a tree to bear fruit if you haven't watered it yet.
I agree. I agree 1,000%.
That's all I wanted to say.
And I agree with you completely, and Caroline mentioned that point. She's learning to love herself. And that's something very revolutionary that Dr. Young is talking about, as Tim was saying. We have to first take care of ourselves, our health, and we have to take care of our spouses, and we have to take care of our children. He even critiqued one couple where the Filipino wife was out there doing the mission, and the husband was home all the time. And he said, the man that's home all the time taking care of the family, that's more important, which is a complete 180-degree turn than what we've heard our whole lives. Our whole lives, we were in the military, sacrifice service. I heard when I came back from international conferences, now you've got to go into the office. And my sons, they're like, you owe me.
Yeah.
I owe you, excuse me? I just went and served in Africa, I went to Korea, I haven't slept for a week, and you're telling me I have to serve you? And you're right, that's completely true. Now is a different age. We're going beyond the age of just serving and just sacrificing. That's a key element that we have to have, but we have that. But we have to be able to love ourselves, we have to be able to create joy, and we have to develop that. But that element still needs to be there, but that can't be the only thing. And to bring in second gen, they're completely different than us, so different than us. They don't have to be in the military. In my mind, I joined the military and went to fight communism. And that was my idea. That's what I'm going to do. And every single day I heard from Reverend Clark and Dr. Suk and all these leaders, sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. You're not sacrificing enough.
Yeah.
Where on the other side, my family's like, my wife's like, I'm a single parent here.
Yeah.
And my kids are like, what the, well, I won't say it, but, you've got to give me love. And now I'm understanding we have to change that whole paradigm, and we are, but it takes a long time to change that paradigm, especially for, I believe, a lot of the Asian leaders. But Dr. Young is doing that. And to be able to do that well, we have to be able to go through the New Testament age. That's why I think connecting with ministers and understanding the love of Jesus, and then through that understanding this agape level of love, that it's so far beyond just sacrifice, which is Old Testament, which is good. We've done that. We've got to continue to do that to a certain level, but we've got to find a balance. And that's very, very hard for us. So it creates a vacuum then in the ego to love, for love to fill, which is all good. But the key element actually is service. And service loving fills a need. It develops an element. It gets us out of ourselves. Please go ahead. So true love is also unconditional. And we have to be able to develop that level of becoming unconditional like God. It helps us to divine our value. A lot of BCs have, and young people in general, Gen Xers and millennials, have a huge issue with their value, who they are. Is that true, honey, or no? Don't know. In general.
Yes,
Yes.
it's true.
Thank you.
It's friggin' true.
It is. They don't know their value because they haven't been able to understand the different elements of it. And after lunch, I'll be talking a little bit about that. There's a whole chapter written in one of our books on that, of how to be able to understand that your value is not what you do. I often ask young people, is your value based on how you look or what somebody does to you? And 99% of young people say it's what other people think of me. It's not from within. And that's a huge issue. That paradigm has to change. So true love also goes beyond all boundaries and extends to those who are lovable and those who are unlovable. Next one, please. It is also internal. We connect with the unmoved mover. It is unchanging in good and bad times, does not give up even when we do. And it has a forever quality. We're always looking for absolutes, but absolutes are very hard to find. We're very relative people. Next slide, please. So true love is also unique. When we have two sons, two young boys, I thought, oh, two young boys, okay, they're both going to be the same. No, completely wrong. Honey's laughing at me, or with me, which isn't Honey.
No, they're opposite.
They're opposite. Yeah, they're completely opposite. One was very much like me. My eldest son was very much like me, very outward-going, loves to speak, loves to get up here to talk. The other one's very quiet, very shy, very much like Jim, who has to, before she would give a lecture or a sermon like this, she wouldn't sleep for 3 days. So, for her to even come up and do the prayer was very good. So, it's suited to each person, and I realized when they became teenagers, they're just so different, and I had to treat them very differently. And love is also appropriate. Okay, next one. It's also faithful and obedient, as we read from Corinthians this morning. It believes in what cannot be seen in yours. It is based in the virtues of trust and hope, and it's a sweet submission to the other's needs. Now, I'm going to ask an interesting question for those who are here as couples. Mamaru, can you change your spouse's attitude and behavior? No. How about Tim? Have you been able to change Gail's attitudes and behaviors as Gail gives you a nudge there?
I have to say yes.
Okay. I've asked this question in thousands of workshops to teachers. Sharon, have you been able to change John's attitudes and behavior?
I wish I could, but no, I can't. I cannot.
Wanjin, had any luck at that so far?
He was making her laugh, that's not all I got.
Okay.
Change your mind though.
Okay. For years and years, I used to try to change June, tried to change how she did things. When she does the dishes, she has water go all over the kitchen floor and the sink. And even now that we've got a dishwasher, the few dishes she washes, still water is everywhere. So if you ever come to our house, make sure you bring those water shoes with you. So for years and years, I tried to change her. But was I successful? No. She's so much smarter than me. She's a heart and soul behind everything I do. You cannot change another person. Even though when I ask this to teachers, youth leaders, ministers, they all believe, yeah, of course, that's my job. I'm going to change students. Ron, can you change another person?
Absolutely. By changing yourself.
By changing yourself, you may influence another person, but you're not changing anybody. You're changing yourself. You may influence them, but who ultimately changes? Hide, I'm going to ask you, who changes? Have you changed your spouse, your attitudes?
No.
No.
Normally, I'm patient and wait until she changes. So she reflects herself and
Who
recognize.
changes? Where does change come from? Outside or inside?
Inside.
It comes from inside. It comes from, how many of you drink coffee every day? How many of you tried to stop drinking coffee? Any success? Extremely difficult. Just drinking coffee. How in the heck are you ever going to change someone else's attitude and behaviors? If you can't change what you're doing yourself, there's no way you can change another human being. So we have to work, as Ron's talking about, as many of you talking about, we change ourselves. You can inspire them, you can cry for them, you can pray, you can do a lot of conditions, but ultimately change comes from within. And even then, to change habits, especially negative habits, so difficult. Last year, do you know the suicide rate through opioids? Did it increase or decrease?
Increase.
Increased. 80,000 people died last year. 80,000 people died of opioid deaths. And most of it because people were depressed. They didn't go out and see others. So even a statistic like that, that's more people than the Vietnam War, is that right? It's a phenomenal statistic. And those lives could and should have been changed if we had been able to bring them to a deeper truth, being able to help them, and be able to create more love and care with each other. Honey, would you like to do Shay's story? Please. This is a story from Educating True Love. One of the biggest elements, if you really want to help others change, is tell them stories. That's the reason I told the story of June doing the dishes. It's not to put her down how she does the dishes. And when I ask other people, well, what else could you do? Well, do the dishes yourself, of course. That's what the ladies say. Please go.
Okay. The touching story of Shay shows how sacrifice and service to others creates an open place for heavenly love to come down to earth. Shay was a young, learning, disabled boy. He and his father were walking past a park where some boys were playing baseball. Shay wanted to play, and his father reluctantly approached one of the boys on the field. The boy said, "Well, we're losing by 6 runs, and the game is in the 8th inning. I guess he can be on our team." Oddly enough, Shay's team started to score until they had a chance to win the game. But Shay was up next. Knowing it meant they would lose, Shay's team still gave him the bat. He didn't even know how to hold it. Thoughtfully, the opposing pitcher moved forward to throw Shay easy, soft pitches. When Shay managed to hit a grounder, the pitcher, instead of throwing it to the first baseman, lobbed it in a high arc out onto right field. Everyone started yelling, "Shay, run to first!" Startled, eyes wide, Shay ran to first and passed it. The right fielder then deliberately threw the ball way over the second baseman's head. And once again, everyone shouted for Shay to run to the next base. The shortstop from the other team even turned him in the right direction. Another wild throw over the third baseman's head had boys from both teams shouting, "Run home, Shay!" Shay ran home and was cheered by all as the hero who had hit the winning home run. This is a true story. That day, the father said, with tears rolling down his face, the boys from both teams helped bring a piece of the divine plan into this world. They did so by their willingness to sacrifice their own interests for the sake of a little boy who needed a win more than they did, and who would always remember the day others created a special space for him to belong in.
Yeah, so those are the kinds of stories that we need to tell, and we need to be able to move the heart, move the emotional side. Most of education, even we focus so much on the intellectual level, but real change happens on the social and emotional level, on the deepest level. And we have to be able to go beyond ourselves to be able to love and serve others that way. Next slide, please, Edie. So true love is also forgiving. Is it easy to forgive others, Andrea? No, it's very difficult, right? To do that, we have to do what, Stephanie? Be arrogant or humble? Be humble, right? It's not so easy. Our ego takes over, and ego is no more than edging God out, being able to love and serve others. And